Is Galbrena a good beginner pull or not? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So, let's say you're just starting out, and you're considering getting Galbrena. Is she going to be an actually good investment for you as a new player, or are there better 5 stars that you can go for instead? Now, in my opinion, I think Galbrena honestly has quite tough competition in this regard. She's coming hot off of the heels of Yuno and Augusta, both of which are honestly very viable beginner pulls, due to numerous different reasons. And we of course have absolute bangers in the game like Phoebe that are literally able to form teams out of completely free characters. So, how does Galbrena hold up against those characters, and is she going to be worthwhile if you're somebody that's just starting out? Well, I think that if you're literally just starting and you don't really have many DPSs, Galbrena's value ends up being pretty high, but this is more so by nature of you not having any strong DPSs. The thing is, the more progressed your account is and the more main DPSs you have, the less and less you're going to need more DPSs, especially if you're somebody that already has triple fusion or has generally just got good investment into the fusion team already. But if you don't have any modicum of investment in this regard, then Galbrena ends up being a pretty good first pickup. Another thing is that she's actually quite reliable to get, because every 2.x DPS is a really good choice. Some of them are more expensive than others in terms of cost, and that is something that we have to discuss with Galbrena too. However, generally speaking, they all have a really good damage baseline, and you can safely invest into basically all of them. In Galbrena's case, I personally believe that she's going to be a pretty safe character to get, because she's a traditional hyper carry. Yes, she does have abilities that are based around echo skill damage, but I personally don't think that archetype is anywhere near as niche as something like negative status is. Take a look at Frolova. While she does really enjoy Cantarella, a character that's able to provide her with many echo-based benefits, she's still completely fine just using Donjin for her outro skill, because it gives some Havoc damage amp. And sure, that's something crazy, but it's good enough for her. And I personally expect Galbrena to follow suit. You're likely just going to be able to stick more Teffy with her and get by just fine. Is it going to be your absolute strongest option? No, not by any means, but I think that if you're lacking a new DPS to start the game with, then you're gonna be fine anyway, and it's definitely gonna feel stronger than whatever else you're gonna have available to you. The only other thing that you can really do if you're just starting out is after getting your Verena off standard, you'd want to get an Encore then, otherwise you're just not really gonna have access to a strong DPS. So she ends up being a good beginner pull simply just because DPSs are inherently good to pick up while you're just starting out. However, what about her actual cost? Is she a good DPS to get in particular, or is there somebody else that would generally be a bit more desirable? And there's also the consideration that Lupa's going to be on banners next to her. Well, I think that Galbrena's in a position where she's not exactly cost-friendly, but she's not exactly expensive either. What I mean by this is that if you've been playing the game for any amount of time, it's likely that you're going to be able to give Galbrena a somewhat decent team. What I mean by this is that you have multiple options you can solve with her, but most of her team options are 5 stars. That's more so just because wuwa doesn't really produce 4-star characters these days. But either way, the point still stands, because there are DPSs out there that are able to utilize 4 stars better than Galbrena would be able to utilize 4 stars. In her case, you ideally want either Branton Lupa in general so that you can have Lupa into more Teffy, or you would get Cho Yuen later on, who's going to be releasing sometime after Galbrena's release. In any of those given situations, Galbrena is going to end up feeling quite strong, and is going to have a pretty strong team. So, does that mean that if you're new, you should pull for Lupa and Galbrena if you're able to? Or should you even consider just saving up for Cho Yuen down the line whenever he drops eventually? Okay, so, I would say that it kind of depends. The thing is, 2.7's banners in general are very niche. The banners and characters on offer are strong, however, they're definitely stronger or weaker depending on what direction you want to take your account in. Yes, you could get Galbrena just so that you would have a strong DPS to carry you through the early game, and just have a good character in general. She would never necessarily fade for you, and you could always use more Teffy Shorekeeper. That is going under the assumption that you're picking Shorekeeper as your 1.x 5-star character that you're able to pull for from the beginner wish. However, investing more into Galbrena, here's the thing. There's 2 possible avenues that you can take here. You get Galbrena, you build her up, and you use more Teffy for the time being, and then you get Cho Yuen. This will be lower cost than waiting to get more Fusion 5 stars. This is because you're likely able to use Shorekeeper on the end, who's permanently available from the 1.x beginner wish if you're somebody that's new. Substitute her for Verena if you didn't pick her up as your first 5-star. And then you're going to have yourself a very strong and complete team as your first proper core. However, if you choose to invest into Lupa instead, you do get a character that's going to end up being very strong overall for all of the fusion characters that you get on your account. And she's going to be good for Galbrena too. Like I said earlier, you can go Lupa into more Teffy into Galbrena, and that's also going to be a strong setup for you. to provide the avenue to invest into Brant Wuthering Waves later on, who is also a very strong unit. Though keep in mind that those units really want their signatures, and this is where cost comes into play. What I mean by that is that you're going to want to invest into more 5 stars than you would if you went for the Choyuan Shorekeeper team, or Verena of course. You get the point. Essentially, Lupa's own damage and Brant's own damage are very relevant, so you would ideally want their signature weapons. And if you don't have Brant Sig, then he drops in value drastically, because it becomes so much harder to build him. You can put him on Blood Pact's Pledge, but you're still missing out on everything that Unflickering Valor gives him within the passive. That weapon is completely tailor-made for him, and we never ended up getting an event weapon that was able to remedy his need for a signature. He really needs it. So you'd have to consider that that's a character that you would have to fully commit to. Lupa's another one where, if you take away the signature, she also loses a lot of her value. So you generally really want signatures for everyone in the team. And Galbrena herself, well, it's a main DPS character, and those generally want their SIGs the most in this game. Any character who has damage as a large part of their value really wants the SIG. And this is why DPSs are basically non-negotiable when it comes to whether you want to get their signature or not. There are some where they can fare better than others if you don't end up managing to land their signature in time. However, in most cases, you really want to get it. Whereas with the Choyuan team, Galbrena is mostly the main star of the show, and while you would ideally want Choyuan's weapon, you can still get away with not having it, and Shorekeeper's another one where you can just give her variation, and you'll get by just fine. The cost is inherently lower, and while you are pulling for a more niche unit, he's still going to end up being a good pickup for Furlova, so if you end up being a Furlova fan down the line, then that's another situation in which you're able to use him. And by having a lower cost team to invest into, you're more readily able to prepare yourself to invest into different teams down the line, thus allowing you more flexibility in general. Now, if you're not particularly interested in investing into Lupa or any fusion characters, or you don't really want to invest into Choyuan because he might be a bit too niche for your tastes, then I actually wouldn't get Galbrena as your first DPS. Yes, she is strong, and I think that she's not bad by any means, but I would say that there's definitely better DPSs you can go for. Augusta just passed, and she works amazingly with Mortefi. She does enjoy using a Yuno, of course, but she doesn't need her. She ended up being a fantastic, viable, beginner-friendly pull. Yuno, while she does ideally want a 5-star teammate to work with, much like Galbrena, her options are far more versatile, and she has so many different teams in which she's able to work well. Very strong character that's even able to act as a main DPS herself and offers you multiple investment avenues. I find that with Galbrena, whenever you get her first, it's pretty rigid in which direction you're able to go. Now, both directions are good, but you should also keep in mind that you just generally have other options when it comes to fusion characters. For example, if you do end up getting an Encore, you could get Lupa instead, have her as your fusion support for a hot minute, it's going to work just fine for you, and then eventually complete the triple fusion core down the line, and you're gonna be pretty happy with that. It is a very strong team core. She's definitely no Phoebe. I feel like we're just never really gonna get another 5-star character that is as free-to-play friendly as Phoebe, because the stars simply aligned for that character to be ridiculously viable for a new player. Yes, she does suffer in wuwa without Shikona in Absolution form, however, she is still generally just so solid with how she's able to use freaking Spectra over on Sanhua and actually get away with it. But you also have to consider that there's more realistic cases like Augusta, or even like Carlotta, who's able to use Static Mist and still feel extremely strong, that can honestly end up feeling like better beginner pulls. So, do I think that Galbrena is worth your asteroids if you're somebody that's newer, or you just generally don't have a lot of teams? The thing is, you want 4 strong teams for TOA anyway, so yes, she's just going to end up being worth it by virtue of you needing more DPSs. But I think that whenever you consider her investment in the long term and how her investment path is a bit more niche compared to some other DPS's investment paths, perhaps you might want to reconsider. Obviously, you don't really want to go weeks and weeks without having a good new main DPS, understandable. And I will say that if you have literally no good limited 5-star main DPS, Galbrena is going to be fine. You have a Shorekeeper, hopefully. You'll hopefully have a Mortefi. It will work. Because Zani on the second half just isn't going to do anything for you if you don't have Phoebe. I am really going to stress that. If you're not sure who to get between those two in terms of a main DPS, please just get Galbrena. It is not worth pulling for Zani unless you are certain that you can get Phoebe next time. And she is just not going to feel good for you until you're able to get that Acolyte, because Confession Phoebe is such an integral part to Zani's main team. So if you're that strapped for a good DPS, then yes, just get Galbrena. Don't even look at Zani if you're not going to get Phoebe down the line. But looking at things from a wider perspective, at least I personally think that while she's not exactly as beginner-friendly as Augusta and Yuno ended up being, she's definitely not on the unfriendly side either. I think she is good, she is a fine beginner pickup, Just keep in mind that there are particular 5 stars that she would like down the line if you would like her to eventually reach her top potential, and she will always be relevant for you if you're just getting her as one of your first few DPSs, because side towers are a thing, she will always have a use case, but if you're hoping to keep her in middle towers, do prepare to make some more niche investments down the line. I would personally recommend Cho Yuen as her dedicated support due to the lower cost, but that's just me, it's up to you. Hopefully this video was able to tell you whether Galbrena is a busted or weak beginner pull or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and good luck saving for your hellish lady.